Welcome to Clocked Out, a show for watch enthusiasts where we discuss the personal stories behind timepieces and reveal the significance they had to the wearer. And today, I am joined with my brother, Charlie Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Charlie.
Happy to be here.
The guy that got me into watches himself.
Thrilled to be here. I thought it was a funny ask when you first reached out because Tom got us back into watches like a whole lifetime later. So I feel like I really started this journey in my late teen years. And now it's been another like 14 years, 15 years now we got into watches that we can spend a little bit more money on. So
let's go back to the beginning here. And I guess with watch number one, and I have a similar story with this watch, but I'll let you begin to tell it here.
Yeah, so I think interest in watches came first time I gave a shit about being into fashion in any sort of way. So maybe 16, 17, and maybe it was Esquire or Maxim magazine saying these are the watches that you would want to wear with these type of clothes. Yeah. And of course you would go through the list of watches and a lot of them would be $5,000. And you say, okay, well that's off the table at 16 when you're making $650 an hour. But Fossil, my first watch, was a brand that was within grasp for me. And I liked this model a lot because it followed, the reason why I brought up the clothes and the fashion end of it was that I had really gotten into a simplistic set of design language with things that I was purchasing in general. So I never liked graphic t-shirts. I just wanted plain black shirts, plain white shirts, kind of no logo type of thing. And this really represents that. So at 16, buying this watch, it was a really no frills, no numbers on the dial, just a 369 kind of Movado inspired type of watch. And I always laugh about this because throughout the years, I've never gotten as many compliments on anything as I've gotten on this watch.
And I, as your brother and someone that stole this watch when I was starting to get into it, I would wear it too. And I remember feeling people would comment on it all the time. And as we've talked about with luxury purchase, it's like those who know, and most people, it's just like, oh, that's a watch. And it makes sense, the minimalist standpoint. And it's an interesting design because it's, I guess it's more boxy. I don't know what the term is, but it's
I think this was a Movado thing, and so I think that this was an imitation of Movado for them. It was $65. I remember finding it online and getting this great deal on it. It's got lume. It did so much for $65, and I wore this thing for years and years and years, replaced the battery so many times.
And I feel like it has heft to it, like you pick up some other watches and it's a quartz watch, but it has heft to it. And I don't know what these lugs are, but it feels big. The band just felt so like thick. I felt very cool with this, and it's got, I guess, like what would we call that? A faux diamond in the top there. But still a class move. And I think Fossil for a lot of people is a stepping stone. I know so many people when it comes to fashion brands, it's, absolutely no nonsense, but here it is getting you into watches. I think if this watch didn't grab a hold of you, who knows where you might have been with the rest of things. But what was kind of the progression from this to, I guess, our next watch here?
Yeah, so I guess I'll even follow up this first watch by just saying I got pretty into the whole Fossil line, and girlfriends that I was dating at the time would purchase those watches for me. And so I ended up having a chronograph from them and probably like 4 or 5 different Fossils over the years that all did pretty well by me. This next piece, I think I probably got a couple of years later after this first one, and this is Bulova, which at the time just seemed like this huge jump up, or just was this huge jump up for me. I think that I went from $65 in this first watch to maybe $250 in this watch. Yep. I liked the red needle on this dial. And there's a little bit more going on here. There's a date complication, and it kind of got a bowl effect going on with the dial that I liked. Huge. I'm realizing when I go back to my watch box that all of these watches just wear so gargantuan. I wasn't thinking about it.
I was going to say, I remember shopping for watches and they'd like drop the specs. I'm like, I don't really care. Like, it looks cool. And so interesting. Yeah. And it is a little bit more put together. I feel like you can tell in contrast to that, there's a little bit more going on with the finishing. And again, while I think Bulova is not completely well respected within the industry, it is still a brand that does have history, and I think a lot of people. I have a Bulova that I really like. It's unique. It's interesting. Not maybe a massive conversation piece or over the top, but it's cool. And I think that watches that get you into watches are good watches.
And so I think it's important to point out everything's so relative.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we got back into watches that I realized Bulova's reputation along like mechanical, like watch enthusiasts, but it never would have occurred to me at the time. And I think for people that aspire to pieces in this range, that they're a perfectly respectable brand. And the watches did really well by me. I got to a point where I had accrued, as you know, probably like 10 different watches that I was rotating with, and I shamelessly would take them to the jewelers and for like $25 have them replace all of the batteries in there and spend their time doing that, and they, to their credit, just put up with me every single time. So I went through quartz battery life cycles probably 6 times with which is long enough, like a year to 2 years, depending on the watch, with jewelers. And then at some point, I think that I just got a little bit embarrassed of heaving all of these cheaper watches in there. So as I got into my mid-20s, I fell away from watches a little bit. And it wasn't until shortly after birth of my first son, I was looking for something to commemorate. And you had also just gotten a luxury watch that I decided to get into that again. So 15 years later, but to speak to the watch that's in front here, this is a Grand Seiko SBGY 007 Amawatari, and it's on a Veblenist.
Yeah, shout them out.
Suede strap. And this is a Chicago-based company. I'm loving this thing so far. It's a 19 millimeter lug width, so it's always really nice to see companies that are supporting that. But to speak to the watch itself, I realized after buying a couple more luxury watches in Omega that I wanted to skew down in case size, in like wearability, and in thickness especially. And so I still really enjoy this minimalist design that they have with the watch, but it's a 9 millimeter width that I thought wore really well on me. And it's got the spring drive movement in it that I was really interested in having. So just a super high degree of accuracy. This watch seems to be like a second per week, or I think it's actually rated to a second a month. And it really does stay that accurate. Love the light blue second needle with the light blue dial and waves.
Very unique dial.
It's really the coolest dial that I've seen in person, and love that about this watch.
I want to see what drove you to Grand Seiko too, because I think that is obviously a brand that plays in the sphere of luxury watches, but I think doesn't get nearly as much attention as plenty of other ones. And now you didn't bring it today, but we both have Omega Seamaster 300s, and I think we got into that purely from aesthetics. I think we were Bond kids. I think that, that's James Bond's watch. That definitely played in. From a price point, it was good, and it was kind of hot at the time. But what about Grand Seiko? Was it the dial and the aesthetics of this? Was it the spring drive, or what was the thing that pushed you to do that? Because I know it's kind of, people go either way on it.
I think the history behind Grand Seiko and what they're doing is really cool. I've joked that Grand Seiko is like the hipster watch company. It really is. And
or maybe like Panerai. I feel like a Panerai, but Grand Seiko, there's
align
a
myself
niche
as a hipster. But the other thing is that my buy into Grand Seiko is really with this watch, because in general, I don't like the bracelets on Grand Seikos, and in general, Grand Seiko skew really thick. They usually are in like the 13 and a half to even on their chronographs up to 15 millimeters. This one at 9.2 millimeters thick is really an anomaly. But I liked this Grand Seiko specifically. And it's one of those things where as you get into watches, you're watching the different watch YouTubers and just checking out a lot of articles. And this was a dial that jumped out at me from the beginning and stuck in my mind. And that's kind of how I've gone about my watch purchases. I've bought a few watches sight unseen at this point, and this was one of them. And you always have that worry after you've spent thousands of dollars, like, is it going to disappoint me when I see it? Is it not going to slap the same way that I thought that it would?
No, and it's a big decision.
Yeah, and but this one really pulled through on that for me. So it was a buy into this specific watch. As much as I like Grand Seiko too, it was a buy into the watch more than the company.
I know there's a couple other ones that didn't make it to the table today, but yeah, I mean, it's between the two of us been a pretty exciting year for watches and such like that. But you got anything else on the horizon, and what are your future plans with watches?
Yeah, I think that I'll always be continuing to look. I've been looking since buying that watch just because I'm really interested in the hobby, and you never know what's going to pop up. There's so many cool watches that I am interested in. But to give a little insight to my collecting strategy, I do want to have it be really diversified. I don't I could feel a pull to buying multiple Rolex models and kind of just going down that rabbit hole. And I don't know if I want to do that. I want to explore some of these other brands. I think that there are a lot of really cool ones. I like a lot of what I want to get into some more complications. So I think Zenith has a real compelling offering when it comes to chronographs. I think that there are less, but there are still some offerings out there that offer really compelling GMTs. So I would want to branch out to different brands to fulfill different areas of the watch collection that I don't have, and then see how I feel about some of these watches in 5 years, and not be too emotionally tied to anything that I want to part with if it no longer makes sense in the collection. I haven't decided specifically yet which of these watches I would want to bestow on to Russ, but it seems like maybe that would be the
maybe for him to decide
the Seamaster, but
whatever's around, you never know.
Whatever's still around at that time.
But on that point, you thought I was gonna let you get away with it, but there is a watch that again is not here, but has left the collection.
Oh, no.
I have not sold a watch yet. They're all sweet, precious little babies to me, and I got a loving heart for all of them. And I know that you recently sold one, and I guess tell us why.
And so that goes into what I just said. The watches that I got before the Grand Seiko were two Omegas. One was a Omega Seamaster 300 professional black dial, and then I bought an accompanying Seamaster white dial Aquaterra with an orange second.
I actually really liked it.
I liked it a lot. The accents, deployment class, rubber strap, and I'm skewing towards these smaller case sizes. So the Seamaster is a 42, the Aquaterra is a 41. I just was feeling like they were wearing larger after I tried on the Grand Seiko, which is a 39 without
you get used to
a
smaller.
Case. There's no real case around that. So the Grand Seiko wears similarly to the Explorer 36, even though it's 36 versus 39, because there's that housing around the Explorer that's not on that Amamutere. So that's why I moved away from the Aquaterra. And I was happy to, the guy that ended up buying it from me was getting his first luxury watch. And it just felt like the right thing at the right time. That was a guy getting into an Omega the same way that I did. Omega's also got the best entrance into luxury watches, right? It's got the coolest box. And
oh my gosh, we could talk about that.
It's a great
Omega
first watch.
as a first watch is a great.
So I was excited for that guy and happy to let it go. And if for whatever reason it really bothers me down the line, I know that it'll be attainable again.
Well, and I think it's a good lesson that if something isn't getting wrist time, if you've kind of changed your feelings on it, these are expensive enough that it's like I don't, to have it sit in a corner, and especially for a good chunk of watches, they're not rapidly increasing in value, so it's not like a long-term hold. And so I'm sure you could have, and you never know, but it's an expensive thing to have sitting around, and it's like if you're not wearing it and you don't like it anymore, you might as well look into exchanging it out for something else.
Agreed.
Which is what you did. So, well, Charlie, I want to thank you very much for being on the show today on the pilot episode. I hope you guys had as good of a time as I did. But any watch tips, any last thoughts? Give us a one-liner to wrap up, Chip.
Get into watches. We need more people in it. I'm worried that this is going to die off with people older than us. So I hope that people get inspired and get into this field. There are a lot of micro brands that aren't represented here today that are a great offering. And don't be bummed out about getting a $250 Bulova, because there's a lot of value in that too.
And if you like it, get it. Yeah, no.
If you like it, get it. Be intentional about the purchases you make when they're a little bit more expensive.
And micro brands usually come in at a price point that's pretty attainable and seemingly more fair for the exchange typically. Well, thank you, Chucky.
Thanks for
we
having
are
me.
signing off here, guys.